Welcome to Relaxing Revenge Storytelling. I'm your host, and tonight's story is a real treat.
My name is Latoya Carson. I'm 42 years old, and on a Tuesday morning in October, I was lying on a gurney outside pre-op at the trauma center where I've worked for 14 years, waiting for someone to wheel me back for emergency gallbladder surgery. My mother had braided my hair an hour earlier. Her hands had been gentle. She'd hummed the way she used to hum when I was small, the same 3 notes over and over, and I'd closed my eyes and let myself believe, for the length of one braid, that I was loved the way I'd always wanted to be loved. Then I heard her voice from the admissions desk, not the humming voice, the other one, the clipped, businesslike voice she used when she wanted something. She was telling the nurse that I had no insurance. She was telling the nurse that the family would not be responsible for the bill. She was telling the nurse that I'd always been bad with paperwork, that they shouldn't expect payment from her or my father, that I'd have to figure it out when I woke up. I have had employer-sponsored insurance for 14 years. I have been paying premiums out of every check since I was 28. My hands went numb before my brain caught up. The monitor next to me started chirping. A nurse I'd trained 2 summers ago looked over and asked if I was okay, and I couldn't answer her because the only thing in my mouth was the taste of pennies and the word, why. Before I tell you what I did next, and what was already waiting for me on a flash drive in my locker, please hit like and subscribe if stories about quiet people finally waking up mean something to you. Welcome back! This channel is for the adults who have spent half a lifetime being told they were the problem in a house that was robbing them blind, and who finally lifted their head one morning and saw it clearly. If that's you, drop the city you're listening from in the comments. I want to know where you are when this lands. To understand how I ended up on that gurney listening to my own mother lie about me to a billing clerk, you have to go back. Not to the surgery, not to the voicemail. Further than that, you have to go back to a kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was 6 years old and being told very gently that I owed somebody something for the fact that I had been allowed to exist. My biological father left when I was 3. I don't remember him. What I remember is a story my mother told me about him, how he walked out, how she had a choice to make, how she chose to keep me even though it would have been easier not to. She told me this story in different versions over the years. Sometimes it was wistful, sometimes it was bitter, sometimes it was a weapon she pulled out at the dinner table when I'd asked for something she didn't want to give. You know what I gave up for you? That was the refrain. You know what I gave up. My stepfather Ronald married her when I was 4. He adopted me on paper when I was 7. He was a big man with thick forearms and a laugh that filled the kitchen, and for a long time I believed he loved me the way fathers were supposed to love daughters. He ran an auto detailing shop off Independence Boulevard. The shop was always struggling. We didn't talk about money in our house, except when we were short of it, which was always, and even then we didn't really talk. My mother would just sigh in a particular way that made you feel like you'd eaten too much. My sister Janine came along when I was 9. She was the easy one. She was the wanted one. Nobody ever told her she'd been chosen. She'd just been born the way most children are born, into a household that was already there for her. I loved her. I still love her. That's part of what makes this hard. I used to braid her hair the way our mother braided mine, sitting on the back porch on summer evenings, the 2 of us watching the lightning bugs come up out of the grass like the air itself was breathing. I taught her how to ride a bike. I taught her how to swim. When she got her first period at school, I left my shift at the hospital cafeteria where I worked through nursing school and drove across town with a box of pads and a Snickers bar and a pair of clean jeans. That's the kind of sister I was. I didn't know yet that I was also the bank. I became a nurse at 23. I started at a community hospital on the east side and moved to the trauma center at 26. Night shift. I liked night shift. I liked the quiet of the building between 3 and 5 in the morning, the way the corridors hummed like the building itself was sleeping, the way you could hear a monitor change tones from 40 feet away. I made decent money. Not great money, but decent. The kind of money that should have let a single woman in her late 20s with no children build a small, careful life. The week I started full-time at the trauma center, my mother sat me down at her kitchen table. She had 2 coffee cups in front of her and a single sheet of paper. She said the family needed to be smarter. She said Ronald's shop was going through a hard patch and they wanted to set up an emergency fund, a real one, the kind grown families have. She said she'd already gone to the bank and opened a joint account in both our names. All I needed to do was sign the auto transfer form, $1,400 a month. It's not a lot, baby, she said. It's a cushion for all of us. God forbid your daddy gets sick. God forbid I do. You wouldn't want us out on the street. I signed it. Of course I signed it. I was 26, and I'd been told my whole life that I owed her, and signing my name on a piece of paper felt like the smallest possible installment on a debt I'd been carrying since before I could read. I never checked the account, not once, in 16 years. I want you to sit with that because I have to sit with it. I work in a hospital, I read charts for a living, I catch medication errors that other people miss. I once saved a man's life because I noticed a single digit was wrong on a potassium order. And in my own life, in my own bank, I let $1,400 walk out the back door every month for 16 years without ever once asking where it was going. That's what guilt does to a person. It doesn't make you stupid. It makes you blind in one specific direction. They knew exactly which direction. I met my husband at 29, married him at 31, had Marcus at 33. The marriage didn't last. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a man who didn't want to be married to a night shift nurse who came home smelling like disinfectant and slept through dinner. We divorced when Marcus was 7. The custody fight was bruising but clean. I got primary. Marcus stayed with me. Marcus is the reason I get up in the morning. He's 9 now. He has a gap between his front teeth and a laugh that sounds like his grandmother Opal's laugh, my real grandmother, my father's mother. And I'll get to her in a minute because she's the whole reason I'm still here to tell you any of this. Marcus loves multiplication tables and hates green beans and wants to be either a paleontologist or a man who drives a tow truck, depending on the day. I have spent every spare dollar of the last 9 years on him. School supplies, sneakers, the orthodontist consultation last spring that the orthodontist said we'd need to address before he turned 11. I told him we'd figure it out. I always told him we'd figure it out. A year after Marcus was born, Ronald renovated his shop. New signage, new equipment, a whole new bay door. I remember complimenting it at Sunday dinner and Ronald grinning and saying, "The Lord provides, baby girl, the Lord provides." He paid for it with $22,000 from the emergency fund. He never told me. He never asked. The Lord had nothing to do with it. The Lord was working overtime at the trauma center on Saturday nights and direct depositing $1,400 a month into a joint account with my mother's name on it. When Marcus was 4, Janine bought a condo over near South End. A nice one. 2 bedrooms, a balcony, the kind of building with a fitness room nobody uses. My mother announced at Easter dinner that they'd been able to give Janine $38,000 for the down payment. "Daddy and I have been saving," she said, and Janine cried at the table and everybody clapped, and I clapped too because that's what you do. You clap for your sister. 3 months later, Marcus needed oral surgery. A stubborn baby tooth that wouldn't come out on its own, growing sideways into the gum, the kind of thing that sounds small until you see your child crying into a pillow because he can't chew. The surgery quote came in at $3,000 and change. My insurance covered most of it, but not all. I needed about $3,000 I didn't have because I'd been giving $1,400 a month to my parents for 9 years and somehow still living paycheck to paycheck. I called my mother. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot at 4 in the morning and I called her and I asked her, voice already apologizing before I'd finished the sentence, if there was anything in the family fund I could borrow. Just borrow. I'd pay it back. "Oh, baby," she said. "I wish we could. We're stretched so thin right now. You know how it is." I knew how it was. I borrowed against a credit card and paid it off over 18 months, and I never said a word about the $38,000 that had bought my sister a balcony, because saying anything would have been ungrateful, and ungrateful was the worst thing a Carson daughter could be. That's the kitchen I grew up in. That's the math I lived inside. And that's where grandmother Opal comes back into the story because Opal, my biological father's mother, had been writing to me my whole life. Cards on birthdays, letters at Christmas, little envelopes that showed up sometimes for no reason at all, with a $5 bill folded inside and a note that said, "For something just for you, baby." My mother hated those letters. She'd hand them to me with 2 fingers like they were sticky. She told me Opal was a difficult woman who'd never accepted that her son had walked out, who blamed my mother instead of him, who couldn't be trusted. I believed her. Of course I believed her. I was 8, then 12, then 20, then 30, and I kept believing her. And I kept writing Opal back the polite, distant letters of a granddaughter who'd been taught from the cradle that this woman was somehow not really family. Opal lived in a small house in Beaufort, South Carolina, 3 hours south of Charlotte. I visited her maybe 6 times in my entire life. 6 times. I think about that number now, and it puts a stone in my chest. 6 times in 40 years. She always had peach iced tea ready. She always smelled like Pond's cold cream and the inside of a hymnal. She never once said a bad word about my mother in my presence. She just held my hand on her front porch and asked me about my work, and looked at me like I was the most remarkable thing she'd ever seen, and I didn't know how to receive that kind of looking. So I cut every visit short and drove back to Charlotte feeling vaguely guilty without knowing why. Opal died in August, 2 months before the surgery, 87 years old in her sleep the way good people sometimes get to go. I drove down for the funeral. My mother didn't come. That woman never liked me, she said. I'm not going to pretend on her behalf. I sat in the second pew of a small AME church in Beaufort and listened to people I'd never met tell stories about a woman I'd barely known, and the stone in my chest got heavier with every story. A woman in a lavender hat leaned over and asked if I was Latoya. When I said yes, she squeezed my wrist and said, "Baby, your grandmother prayed for you every single night of her life. Every single night. You hear me?" I heard her. I drove home through a rainstorm so heavy I had to pull off at a gas station outside Florence, and I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel and I cried the way I hadn't cried since the divorce. Not loud, just steady, the way rain falls. 2 weeks after the funeral, a small padded envelope arrived at my apartment. The return address was a law firm in Beaufort. Inside the envelope was a brass locket on a thin chain, the kind of locket women wore in 1955, and a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. The paper said the locket was mine, that Opal had wanted me to have it, that the firm would be in touch regarding additional matters in due course. I opened the locket that night at my kitchen table. There was a tiny photograph inside, the kind that's been cut down to fit, of me at maybe 4 years old sitting in Opal's lap on her front porch, both of us squinting into the sun. Behind the photograph, folded so small it was almost nothing, was a piece of onion skin paper. Opal's handwriting, 6 words. "You were never a debt, baby." I read it 3 times before the meaning landed. And then I folded the paper back into the locket, and I closed the locket, and I put it in the drawer of my bedside table. Because I didn't know what to do with it. Because nobody had ever said anything like that to me in my life, and I didn't have a category for the feeling it produced. It was the first thread. I didn't know that yet. 3 days later, the lawyer called. She was a brisk, kind woman named Mrs. Holloway. She said Opal had set up a trust in my name. She said the amount was $340,000. She said the trust had been structured so that only I could access it. Not my husband if I had one. Not my parents, not my sister, not anybody else who shared my last name or any other name. She said it had been set up 2 years before Opal died, that Opal had been very specific about the structure, that Opal had said, quote, "Latoya's people will try to get at it, make sure they can't." I sat on the floor of my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and Mrs. Holloway's voice coming through it, and I could not make my mouth form a single word. "Latoya," she said, "are you still there, honey?" I told her I was still there. I told her I'd call her back. I hung up and I sat on the kitchen floor for 45 minutes with my back against the cabinet, and I tried to understand what had just happened to me. An 87-year-old woman I had visited 6 times in my life had known 2 years before her death that my own parents would come for any money she left me. She had known. She had built walls. From 3 hours south of Charlotte, in a small house that smelled like cold cream and hymnals, she had been paying attention to a granddaughter she barely got to see, and she had seen things I hadn't seen, and she had quietly engineered a shield around me before I even knew I needed one. That was on a Friday. On Saturday, my gallbladder started screaming. By Sunday morning, I was in the ER of my own hospital with a temperature of 103 and a surgeon I'd worked alongside for 9 years telling me we were operating that afternoon. My mother showed up while I was being prepped. She brought soup in a Tupperware container and she sat next to my bed and she braided my hair the way I told you. She hummed. Her hands were gentle. And while she was braiding my hair, with the locket in my hospital-issued belongings bag 2 feet away, she had already been to the admissions desk and told them I had no insurance. I want you to hold both of those images at the same time. Her hands in my hair, her voice at the desk, the same woman, the same hour. That's the contradiction that broke something in me that no surgeon could put back. I didn't say anything when I heard her at the desk. I didn't have the strength. I lay on the gurney and I let them wheel me back and I went under. And when I woke up 6 hours later in recovery, my best friend Denise was sitting next to my bed instead of my mother. Denise is a charge nurse on a different unit. We've worked together for 11 years. She is the closest thing to a sister I have, biological lines be damned. She was holding a small white envelope in her lap and she was crying, which Denise does not do, which Denise has not done in front of me even one time in 11 years of trauma shifts. "Latoya," she said, "I have to give you something and I have to tell you something, and I'm so sorry I waited this long." What she gave me was a flash drive, black plastic, scuffed on one corner, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at the drugstore. What she told me was that she had been collecting things for 9 months. 9 months. Since the previous January, when my father had come into the hospital cafeteria and asked her for my shift schedule, telling her he wanted to plan a surprise party. "There was no party, Latoya," she said. I checked. I asked your mother about it 3 weeks later, real casual. She didn't know what I was talking about. That had been the beginning. Denise had started paying attention. She had started screenshotting things. My father's text messages asking her over and over in different ways when my apartment would be empty. The photographs that had shown up later in a renter's insurance claim he'd tried to file in my name. Photographs of my own living room taken from angles I had not stood at. The credit applications. There were 3 of them. 3 credit cards open in my name between 2019 and 2023 carrying $27,000 of debt I had never spent, with signatures that were not mine but were close enough to mine that a tired clerk wouldn't catch it. And the recording. Denise saved the recording for last. She said, "Latoya, this is the worst one. You don't have to listen to it today. You can wait." I told her to play it. If anyone listening to this has ever been called dramatic for asking where your own money went, for asking a simple, ordinary adult question about an account with your name on it, please stop the video for 1 second and hear me say this. You are not dramatic. You are awake. Tell me in the comments what finally woke you up. I want to read every single one. The recording was a phone call between my mother and my sister Janine, 6 minutes long. They were laughing about something at the start. Then Janine asked, in the casual way you'd ask about the weather, whether the next transfer from my paycheck had hit yet. My mother said it had. Janine said something about needing it for her mortgage. And then my mother, Patricia, the woman who had braided my hair an hour before lying to billing about my insurance, said the sentence I will carry to my grave. Honey, Latoya doesn't need to know where the money goes. She'll just keep giving. She's the ATM, Janine. She always has been. Just keep the joint account open and smile when she visits. The recording ended. Denise turned the laptop screen toward the wall. The morphine pump clicked next to my hip. My hands were numb again, not from the morphine, from something older than morphine, from a place inside my chest where a small girl had been standing for 36 years, waiting to be told she wasn't a debt. Opal 6 words on the onion skin paper rose up in front of me like they'd been written on the ceiling. Denise said, "I'm not family, Latoya. I shouldn't be the one giving you this. I told myself for months it wasn't my place." She said, "But I watched your father lie to your custody mediator in March. I watched you lose 8 pounds in 5 weeks. I couldn't watch it anymore." She said, "I'm sorry." I reached for her hand with the arm that didn't have the IV in it, and I held it, and I didn't say anything, because there was nothing in my mouth except gratitude shaped like a stone, and you cannot speak through a stone. You can only carry it. We sat like that for a long time. Outside the window, the sky was doing the gray thing Charlotte skies do in October, that flat pewter color that holds all day. A cart rolled past in the hallway. Somebody laughed 2 rooms over. The world kept going. It always does. That's the cruelty of it and the mercy of it, both. I did not confront my mother. I want to say that clearly, because I think people expect a scene, and there was no scene. There was no shouting in a parking lot. There was no slammed door. There was a 42-year-old woman lying in a hospital bed with a 4-inch incision in her abdomen and a flash drive on the rolling tray next to her cup of ice chips, deciding for the first time in her adult life what she was going to do next without asking permission. The morning I was discharged, my mother showed up to drive me home. I told her I had a ride. She said, "Don't be silly, Latoya. Who do you have?" I said, "Denise." She made a face. She always made a face when I said Denise's name. I let her make the face. I rode home with Denise. I went to my apartment. Marcus was at his father's for the week, which gave me 5 days. 5 days is a lot of days if you know what to do with them. I closed the joint account on Tuesday morning. The bank officer was a young woman in a gray cardigan who looked at the transaction history on her screen for a long time before she looked back up at me. She removed her glasses and set them on the desk, and she said, "Ma'am, you need to sit down." I told her I was already sitting. She said, "Ma'am, do you know how much money has moved through this account in the last 16 years? I told her I had a rough idea. The figure she said out loud was $268,000. $268,000 of my labor, my night shifts, my missed dinners with my son, my Christmases worked for double-time pay, signed away 1 ACH transfer at a time because a woman who chose to keep me had taught me that choosing not to throw a baby away was a debt the baby would owe forever. I signed the closure paperwork. I did not cry in the bank. I cried in the parking lot afterward, in my car with the windows up, the same way I'd cried outside the gas station in Florence, steady like rain. On Wednesday, I went to the police station with the credit card paperwork Denise had assembled. I filed a fraud report. The officer was patient. He asked the questions you have to ask in a case like this. Ma'am, are you aware these accounts are in your name? Ma'am, did you authorize these accounts? Ma'am, do you wish to press charges against the individuals you believe opened them? I told him I wasn't sure yet about the charges. I told him I just needed the accounts frozen and a report on file. He understood. He'd seen this before, I could tell. He had the kind of tired patience cops get when they've watched the same kind of family eat itself in the same kind of way too many times. On Thursday, I found a townhouse to rent off Sharon Amity Road. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a kitchen with a window over the sink. The landlord was a woman named Mrs. Ellington, soft-spoken, mid-60s, who'd been a labor and delivery nurse before she retired into real estate. She looked at my application, looked at me, and said, "Honey, you're going to be just fine here. I'm telling you about Mrs. Ellington because she comes back in this story in a way I didn't expect. Hold her in your mind." On Friday, I called Mrs. Holloway in Beaufort and told her I was ready to talk about the trust. She walked me through it slowly. The $340,000 was real. It was protected. It was structured so that no one could touch it but me, and only under conditions I controlled. Mrs. Holloway said near the end of the call, "Your grandmother left a letter for you with the file. I have it here. Do you want me to mail it, or would you rather come down?" I said I'd come down. I drove to Beaufort the following Saturday. I left Marcus with Denise. The drive is 3 hours if you don't stop. I stopped twice, once for gas, once because I had to stand outside a Waffle House in Hardyville and breathe. Mrs. Holloway's office was on the second floor of a building above a hardware store. She sat me down at a small round table by the window and she put a cream-colored envelope in front of me and she said, "Take all the time you need, I'll be right outside." The envelope had my name on it in Opal's handwriting, just LaToya, no last name, the way you'd write to somebody who belonged to you. I sat in that chair for a long time before I opened it. The light coming through the window was the soft yellow light Beaufort gets in the late afternoon. I could hear a screen door somewhere downstairs. I held the envelope in my hands and I felt the weight of paper in a way I had not felt the weight of paper before. Then I opened it. My LaToya, it began. If you are reading this, then I'm gone, and you're sitting in Charlotte or Beaufort with this letter in your hands, and I'm very sorry that I'm not there to say these things to your face. I tried, baby. I tried for 40 years to get close enough to say them, and your mama kept the door mostly shut, and I made my peace with what I could and what I couldn't, so I'm writing them down. Read slow. I will wait. I read slow. I had to. There were places I had to put the letter down on the table and look out the window and let the wave pass. First thing, your daddy, my son, your blood daddy, left you when you were 3 years old, and that was his sin, and it was not yours, and it was not your mama's, no matter what story she has told you over the years. He left because he was a weak man who could not stand to be a father, and the leaving belonged to him alone. You did not cause it. You did not pay for it. You owe no one anything for being born. Do you hear me, child? You owe no one, not one red cent, not one bowed head, not one apology. I put the letter down. I picked it up again. Second thing, I have watched your mama and Ronald over the years treat you like a checkbook with a heartbeat. I saw it the first Christmas you came down to visit me with that joint account paperwork in your purse. You didn't show it to me, but I saw the corner of it, and I knew Patricia's handwriting from the church directory she sent me 1 year by mistake. I knew. I have known for 16 years, LaToya, and I want to tell you why I did not tell you. I did not tell you because you would not have believed me. You would have thought I was the bitter old woman your mama said I was. You had to come to it yourself, and I had to find another way to help you. So I found another way. The money in the trust is the other way. I had to stop again. Third thing, they will come for it. When they find out, and they will find out, your mom and Ronald, and maybe Janine too, they will come for it. They will say it should be family money. They will say I was a stranger to you and had no right. They will say all manner of things. I have set the trust up so they cannot touch 1 penny. Mrs. Holloway is a good woman and she will protect you. But you have to be strong, baby. You have to look them in the face and say no, and you have to mean it, and you have to keep meaning it even when your mama cries. And she will cry, LaToya. She has a real talent for it. Do not be moved. The tears are a tool. The braiding is a tool. The soup is a tool. I'm telling you this because I love you, not because I want to make you hard. I want you to be able to see clearly. Seeing clearly is not the same as being hard. I think that was the line that broke me, not the money, not the warning, that one sentence. Seeing clearly is not the same as being hard. I had spent my entire adult life confusing those two things. I had stayed soft by staying blind. Opal was telling me I could see and still be soft. I could be awake and still be tender. The two were not opposites. I had not known that. Nobody had ever told me that. I read the sentence 3 more times. The yellow light moved an inch across the table while I sat there. A car door slammed downstairs in the street. Somebody called a child's name twice, and the child did not answer. I noticed that the table under my hands was real oak, not veneer, and that there was a small ring stain near the edge where somebody, years ago, had set down a coffee cup without a coaster. I noticed I was breathing. I noticed I had not breathed all the way down in a very long time. 4th thing, you have a son, Marcus. I only met him twice, and he is a wonder, baby, a pure wonder. That gap between his teeth is your daddy's gap when he was 9, before he turned into what he turned into. Marcus does not have to inherit any of this. The chain stops with you, Latoya. You break it. You stop handing yourself over. You raise that boy to know he is not a debt. You raise him to know he was a gift. The same way you were a gift. The same way I was trying to tell you in that locket I sent you. I touched the locket at my throat. I had clasped it on that morning before driving down. It sat against my collarbone, and it was warm from being against my skin. I closed my fist around it through the front of my shirt and held it for the length of 3 breaths. Last thing, I'm not asking you to forgive them. Forgiveness is between you and God, and it can take as long as it takes, and some days it might not come at all. I'm asking you to walk away. Just walk. Do not explain. Do not justify. Do not give them a final speech they can twist into a story for the church ladies. Just close the account. Move. Change your number if you have to. Live the life I could not give you up close, but tried to give you from down here. And one day, when you are sitting somewhere quiet with that boy of yours doing his schoolwork in the next room, you remember that there was an old woman in Beaufort who prayed for you every single night for 42 years and never once thought of you as anything but the best thing her son ever did, even though he did not stay to see it. You were never a debt, baby. You were the gift. I love you, Grandmother Opal. I read the letter 4 times. By the 4th time, I was not crying anymore. I was just sitting there with my hands flat on the table on either side of the paper, breathing the slow way you breathe when something inside you has finally lined up with something else. I could feel the grain of the oak under my palms. I could hear the hardware store bell jingle every time somebody walked in downstairs. I counted the jingles, 7 in the time I sat there reading. 7 people going on with their Saturday afternoon while a woman 2 floors up came apart and put herself back together at the same table. Mrs. Holloway came back in after a while and put a glass of water in front of me without saying anything. I drank the water. The water was cold and tasted faintly of the well it had come from, mineral and clean. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope and put the envelope in my purse next to the flash drive Denise had given me. 2 pieces of paper, 1 digital file, 1 brass locket. That was my whole inheritance, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. I drove back to Charlotte that night with the radio off. I have never made a quieter drive in my life. Somewhere outside Columbia, the moon came up over the pines, and I said, "Thank you," out loud to nobody, and the silence in the car did not feel empty. It felt like somebody was riding with me. The first thing I did when I got home was sign the lease on the townhouse. Mrs. Ellington met me at the property on a Sunday morning. She handed me the keys. There were 4 of them on a small steel ring, and they were still warm from her hand. She watched my face when I clipped my key ring onto them. She said, "Honey, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Is somebody bothering you? You walked in here last week looking like a deer." I told her the short version. Not the whole thing, just enough. Joint account, 16 years, hospital, insurance lie. She listened the way nurses listen. She did not interrupt. She did not gasp. She let me finish a sentence before she nodded. When I finished, she folded her hands in her lap and she said very quietly, "Honey, if anyone comes to me claiming to be your landlord representative, or claiming you violated this lease, or claiming anything at all about your tenancy, I am going to record every word and I am going to call you the second they leave. You hear me?" I heard her. I did not know yet why she said that. I would find out 3 weeks later. I moved on a Tuesday. Denise and 2 nurses from the trauma unit helped me pack. We did it in one day, 12 boxes, 2 suitcases, Marcus's bed broken down into 4 pieces, and the small writing desk I had bought for myself the year I got divorced. I gave my mother no forwarding address. I did not block her number. I just stopped answering it. There is a difference. Blocking is a statement. Not answering is a life. The phone call started on Wednesday. 3 the first day, 5 the next, 11 in one 24-hour stretch that following weekend. Voicemails first apologetic, then confused, then sharp, then crying, then sharp again. Latoya, where are you? Latoya, this is your mother. Latoya, I don't know what Denise told you, but you cannot believe a word of it. Latoya, your father is sick with worry. Latoya, you are being childish. Latoya, please. Latoya, Latoya, Latoya. I listened to none of them past the first sentence. I deleted them in batches. I would sit at my new kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee gone lukewarm in my hand, and I would scroll and delete, the way you scrape the last of the ice off a windshield in February. Marcus asked me one night while I was rinsing dishes, "Mama, why doesn't Grandma come over anymore?" I dried my hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, and I sat down at the table across from him, and I said, "Baby, Grandma and I are taking some time apart. Sometimes grown-ups need to do that. It's not about you. You did nothing wrong." He nodded the slow, serious nod he does, and he went back to his multiplication sheet. The pencil scratched across the page. He was on the 6s. He's 9. He understood more than I gave him credit for. Kids always do. 3 weeks after I moved, my father showed up at Mrs. Ellington's office. He had a piece of paper with him. He told her he was my father, that I was behind on rent, that I had violated the lease by housing an unauthorized occupant, that he was there to help her serve me with an eviction notice and arrange for his business partner to take over the unit. He laid the fake eviction paper on her desk like it was a real thing. Mrs. Ellington, bless that woman, bless every gray hair on her head, let him talk for 12 full minutes. She nodded. She asked clarifying questions. She wrote things down on a yellow legal pad. The whole time her phone was sitting on the desk between them, recording. When he was done, she told him she'd need to review the documents and would be in touch. She walked him to the door. She locked it behind him. Then she called me. I was at the trauma center when the call came in. I stepped out into the stairwell at the end of the hallway, the one nobody uses except for fire drills, and I sat down on the concrete step with my back against the cinder block. She played me the recording over the phone. I could hear my father's voice, the same big voice that had filled my mother's kitchen for 38 years, the voice that had called me baby girl the day I graduated nursing school, telling a stranger that I was a deadbeat tenant, that he was authorized to handle my affairs, that his business partner would be ready to take possession by the end of the month. I did not feel rage when she played me the recording. I want you to know that. I felt something colder and clearer than rage. I felt the steady, quiet click of a door closing inside my chest, a door that had been swinging on a broken hinge my whole life. The stairwell light hummed above me. Somewhere 2 floors up, somebody was opening a door, and the sound traveled down the shaft and arrived at my ear thinned out and small. I thanked her. I asked her to send me a copy of the file. I added it to the flash drive Denise had given me in a folder I had labeled simply evidence. I did not pursue charges. I did not need to. I had something better than charges. I had distance, and I had proof, and I had a grandmother's voice in my pocket telling me I was the gift. The collapse of their world happened without me. I want to be clear about that too. I did not push any of it over. I just stopped holding it up. Within 5 weeks of me closing the joint account, Ronald's auto detailing shop lost its lease. Turned out the rent had been quietly subsidized for years by transfers from the family fund, transfers Ronald had been calling business overhead on his taxes. The shop closed in December. I drove past it once on a Tuesday afternoon, not on purpose, on my way back from Marcus's dentist, and the new bay door he had been so proud of was chained shut with a hand-lettered sign in the window that said, "For lease," and a phone number that was not his. I did not slow down. I did not speed up. I just kept driving. Janine's condo mortgage bounced twice in 2 months. She had to sell. The sale closed at $14,000 under what she'd paid, and she moved into a 1-bedroom apartment over near Eastland. My mother's sapphire bracelet, the one she'd worn to the family barbecue the summer before, announcing to 40 relatives that Latoya still can't manage money. The bracelet I now knew had been bought with 3 months of my night shifts, went to a pawn shop on Albemarle Road. I know because the woman who pawned it next to her recognized my mother and told Denise's cousin, and Denise's cousin told Denise, and Denise told me one evening over takeout in my new kitchen. And the 2 of us sat at my new table eating pad thai out of the white cardboard containers and not laughing. Exactly, but breathing in a particular way that women breathe when something has finally turned right side up. The chopsticks clicked against the cartons. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Marcus was asleep upstairs. I could hear the small whir of the box fan in his room through the ceiling. The piece that hit my mother hardest was not the bracelet. It was the church. 2 women in her fundraising committee heard the recording. I do not know how. I never sent it to anybody. I think Denise's mother knew somebody who knew somebody, and these things travel along their own roads, and within a month my mother was no longer on the committee. She had been the chair. She had run that committee for 9 years. When she lost it, she lost the only stage where she had ever been allowed to be the version of herself she liked most. I felt a flicker of pity when I heard, just a flicker. I let it pass without acting on it. Opal's letter sat in the drawer next to my bed, and the letter did not blink, and the letter did not flinch, and the letter said, "Do not be moved." Ronald called 11 times in the first week of January. I did not answer once. On the 12th call, he left a voicemail in which he said, voice broken in a way I had never heard from him, "Latoya, baby girl, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Please, please call your daddy." I deleted it. I want you to understand something about that deletion because I think this is the hardest part of this whole story to explain to people who haven't lived it. I did not delete it out of cruelty. I deleted it because I knew with the bone-deep certainty Opal had been trying to give me my whole life that if I called him back, I would be back inside the old machine within 10 minutes. Not because I was weak, because the machine was very, very good at what it did. The machine had been built around me starting when I was 3 years old. The only way out of the machine was to not get back inside it. So I deleted the voicemail and I went into the kitchen and I made Marcus a grilled cheese. I cut it in half on the diagonal the way he liked. I put 3 pickle slices on the plate next to it. He came down the stairs in his sock feet and sat at the table and ate it without looking up, the way 9-year-old boys eat, and I sat across from him and watched him, and did not say a single word about the deleted voicemail or the man who had left it. January turned into February. The townhouse started to feel like ours. Marcus chose the paint color for his room, a particular shade of dark blue he called spaceship blue. I painted it on a Saturday with Denise's help, and Marcus stood in the doorway directing us like a tiny foreman, pointing at corners we'd missed and announcing, "You got a holiday right there, Mama," the way he'd heard a painter say on a home improvement show. The paint smelled sharp and clean. The roller made that soft, wet sound against the wall. By dinner time, the room was the color of a deep summer night, and Marcus lay flat on his back in the middle of the bare floor and stared up at the ceiling and said, "This is the best room in the world." I hung a framed photograph of Opal in the hallway between our bedrooms. It was the only photograph of her I had, her at maybe 60, standing on her porch in Beaufort, one hand on the railing, squinting into the sun. Marcus asked who she was. I told him. I told him she had loved him before she ever met him. I told him she had loved me before I knew I could be loved. He looked at the photograph for a long time, and then he reached up and touched the brass locket at my throat, and he said, "Mama, is she in there too?" I told him yes. He nodded and went back to his room. The trust money I touched carefully. Mrs. Holloway and I worked out a structure. A portion went into an emergency fund of my own, a real one this time, in an account with only my name on it at a bank my mother did not use. A portion went into a college account for Marcus, locked down the way Opal had locked mine down so that no relative of any description could ever come near it. A portion paid off the credit cards opened in my name, because even though they were fraudulent, the fastest road to peace was just to clear them rather than spend 2 years fighting the credit bureaus. The rest I left where it was, growing slowly the way Opal had left it for me. I did not buy anything dramatic. I bought a used Honda CR-V to replace the dying car I'd been driving for 9 years. I bought Marcus's oral surgery without flinching. I bought a small writing desk for the corner of my bedroom where the morning sun came in. That was it. The money was not for spending. The money was for breathing. It was the airlock between me and the old machine, and I was going to keep it that way. In March, on a Saturday afternoon, my sister Janine called from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up because I didn't know it was her. She was crying when she said hello. She said, "Latoya, please, please just talk to me. I didn't know everything Mama was doing. I swear I didn't. I just want to see you." I let her cry for a minute. I sat down at the kitchen table and I put the phone on speaker and I set it face up on the wood and I listened to my sister cry. The way I had listened to her cry 100 times before, when boys had broken up with her, when she had failed a class in college, when her first apartment had a roach problem. I had always been the one to fix it. I had always been the one to drive over. 43 seconds passed before I spoke. Then I said very quietly, Janine, I have the recording. I have the one where you ask Mama when the next transfer is going to hit. I have heard it many times. You knew enough. There was a long silence on the line. I let the silence sit on the table between us. I did not rush in to soften it. I did not apologize for the temperature of my own voice. Then she said, "Latoya, I'm sorry." I said, "I believe you." I said, "I'm not going to talk to you for a while. Maybe a long while. Maybe never. I don't know yet. I am not angry at you the way I'm not angry at a hurricane. You are what you were raised to be. So am I. I'm choosing what I'm going to be next. You will have to choose for yourself." I hung up gently. I did not slam the phone down. I just set it on the counter and went outside. That brings me to the porch. The back porch of the townhouse on Sharon Amity Road, the porch where I'm sitting right now in a wooden chair Mrs. Ellington gave me from her own garage on an October afternoon almost exactly 1 year after the surgery. Marcus is at the kitchen table inside, working through a multiplication sheet, mumbling the sevens under his breath the way he does. The light is going gold the way Beaufort light goes gold in the late afternoon, even up here in Charlotte, even 3 hours north. The brass locket sits against my collarbone. It ticks there when I move, gently, the way a second heartbeat would tick if you could have one that belonged only to you. The wood of the chair is warm from the sun. A pair of cardinals is working the dogwood at the back of the yard. The kitchen window is open, and I can hear Marcus say, 7 times 8 is 56. And then, a second later, quieter, almost to himself, yes. I have not spoken to my mother in 14 months. I do not know exactly where she's living now. I hear, through cousins, that she and Ronald moved into a smaller apartment off Wilkinson Boulevard. I hear Ronald is doing detail work out of his cousin's garage, day to day, no shop. I hear my mother is quieter than she used to be. I do not feel triumph about any of this. I feel a low, slow grief, not for what they lost, but for who they could have been if they had ever once looked at me and seen a daughter instead of an account. That grief lives in me. It has not left. I do not expect it to. Opal told me in her letter that forgiveness is between me and God and might take as long as it takes. I'm taking my time. I do not owe anybody a deadline on it. I used to think love and money were the same conversation in my family, that giving the second proved the first. I was wrong. They were never the same conversation. They were not even in the same language. My mother spoke money fluently and love not at all, and I spent 36 years trying to translate between them and exhausting myself in the dictionary. I used to think being a good daughter meant being a quiet one. I was wrong about that too. A good daughter is an honest one, and honesty sometimes sounds like no, and sometimes sounds like a closed account, and sometimes sounds like a forwarding address she does not give. And I used to think the people who shared your last name had a first claim on you that nobody else could match. I was wrong about that most of all. The woman who loved me most in this world shared neither my last name nor my address, and I only visited her 6 times, and she still managed to save my life from 3 hours away and 2 years dead. Blood is not the question. Witness is the question. Who saw you? Who paid attention? Who was quietly in the background of your life, building you a door? If you are listening to this and somebody in your house has been calling you the family ATM, has been telling you that asking questions about your own money makes you ungrateful, has been braiding your hair with one hand and lying about you with the other, please hear me. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not the problem. You are awake. And there may be somebody, somewhere, who has already started building you a door. Sometimes it's a grandmother. Sometimes it's a coworker. Sometimes it's a landlord with a phone on her desk. Pay attention to who shows up. Pay attention to who pays attention. That's my story. 1 brass locket from a grandmother I barely visited. 1 flash drive from a friend who said, "I can't watch this anymore." 1 letter on cream-colored paper that took 6 minutes to read and 42 years to receive. If any piece of this hit a nerve, if you have your own grandmother, your own Denise, your own moment in a hospital corridor when somebody you loved gave you away to a stranger, tell me in the comments. Tell me about the door somebody built for you. Tell me about the door you're still trying to build for yourself. I read everyone. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe because there are more of us than you think, and we find each other in places like this. Take care of yourselves out there. Watch who shows up.